Good afternoon, and thank you, Beatriz, for that very kind introduction, Mark and the rest of the team for the opportunity to be here today. I will begin by introducing you to three American women. Christina grew up in Los Angeles. She is a child of immigrants from Jalisco in western Mexico. Both of her parents grew up in poverty, working the fields, feeding the handful of animals they had. As time passed, life grew almost impossible, and both Christina's parents had to leave everything behind in search not of a better life, but of merely a life, and this is crucial when you think of immigrants, a place that would allow them to live in peace and feed the family they planned to build together in the United States. So they moved here to California. They began right at the bottom, slowly working their way up. They had children, including Christina, and in time gave them a bilingual, bicultural, and binational education. Christina has visited her parents' land. When she walked along those same roads her parents took to the fields and back, Christina realized, she told me, how far her family had come in just one generation, just a few years. She graduated recently from Cal State LA and now works at USC on a project focused on young Latina mothers. Next for her is graduate school. Jessica also grew up in Los Angeles. She was born in Morelia, Michoacán, the daughter of a carpenter. Life in Michoacán was difficult in the mid-90s, and her parents faced a stark choice. Either stay and try to make ends meet in what was then a declining economy amid the already growing threat of drug violence, or leave in search, again, just of a life, not of a better life, just the possibility of a life. They chose the latter. Jessica crossed the border quickly, she remembers, carrying a fake ID. Once here in California, she learned English quickly and assimilated. She went to school, made friends, and then, when she was barely a teenager, her father was deported. He got caught drunk driving and was deported. Jessica's life changed immediately. She began to work, helping her mother take care of the family. She has quite a few siblings. And then a few years ago, she applied for DACA. It changed her life. She felt she belonged. She was no longer afraid. Jessica was free. Of course, Jessica has heard stories about Mexico, and she is longing to go. I asked her if she would ever move back, and she said, no, I would only like to visit. She was very clear on that. She is now a manager at a restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. Finally, Susana. Susana grew up nearby in Los Angeles as well. She was born in Irapuato, Mexico, a city in central Mexico, in my country, known for its truly delicious strawberries. Her father grew up selling candy in the streets of nearby León, Guanajuato, while Susana's mother worked at a factory from a very early age. They met each other when they were 13 years old. When Susana's mother was pregnant, her father decided to emigrate in search again of a life. Susana was barely 6 months old when she crossed the border in her mother's arms. Along the way, due to the unbearable stress, the heat, her mother's breast milk simply stopped flowing all of a sudden. Another woman took Susana and fed her near a ravine in the desert. Sent by God, Susana says now. In Los Angeles, Susana's parents worked long hours, but took the time to instill in their children one absolute priority that you can hear time and time again among immigrants like Susana and Jessica and Christina: education. Bicultural, binational, bilingual. Susana had the dream of going to college. Once again, DACA allowed her to gain entry into Cal State Los Angeles, which is where I met her. She graduated just a few months ago in 2017, the first in her family to do so. The first, I kid you not, in literally centuries to gain higher education. Her father, who just 3 decades before was selling packs of gum on the streets of León, Guanajuato, corners in León, Guanajuato, gave her a standing ovation. She now works as a nursing assistant. These are 3 American women. What do these 3 women have in common? I've described them all. They are all obviously hardworking. They embody very clearly American effort and resilience, the American ideal since the beginning of this country of ours. They are all immigrants, or in the case of Christina, children of immigrants, a child of immigrants. Either them, 2 of them, or their parents face the threat of deportation to a country that's simply no longer theirs. None of them have ever gone back to Mexico. So that is all true. They share all of these characteristics that I just shared. But most of all, they share something else that we have to see very clearly now. They are all invisible. People like Susana, Christina, and Jessica are invisible in today's America. Maybe not for you, I hope, but certainly for most Americans. The plight of the immigrant, all its difficulties, wonders, and incredible achievements, is mostly invisible in the United States in 2018, in spite of the incredible economic power the immigrant community and the Hispanic community in general holds. It's a paradox that I find hard to explain. I met Christina, Susana, and Jessica on a project I began half a decade ago here in Los Angeles. I called it La Mesa. I'm very creative. It revolves around the table, so I'm very creative. The premise couldn't be simpler. I take a small round table that you see there and 2 plastic chairs. I place them in a small cart that I carry around and set everything up on corners chosen completely at random. We decide that they were going to set up La Mesa. We say, let's go there. We just go there. We don't tell anyone. There's no pre-production. There's no notes. There's no pen, paper, pencil, nothing, no notes. Without a suit or tie, and thank God without makeup, which is what I have to wear every single day as a news anchor. I sit there and I invite people to sit across the table from me and simply tell me the story of their lives. I begin every interview with one simple question: what is your name? ¿Cómo se llama usted? I invite them to become visible. I have interviewed hundreds of immigrants this way. Not one of them, imagine hundreds and hundreds of interviews, not one of them has ever stood up, no matter how emotional or personal, and they do get emotional and personal, no matter how emotional or personal the questions get. Once the interview is over, they sign their name. You can see it there on the tabletop of La Mesa with a big Sharpie, affirming their identity with indelible ink, becoming fully visible in front of an audience of hundreds of thousands that follows the segment, the La Mesa segment, religiously on television and online. A couple of years back, I got to hold, as I still do, the Wally Sannenberg Chair in Journalism at USC, and we came up with a concept called La Casa, once again very creative. It's a larger canvas. I invite my kids to embed with a Hispanic family and tell the story of an immigrant family in Southern California, and the result has been also, I think, thanks to the students, quite remarkable. So the fight against the invisibility of the oppressed, the abused, the ignored, or the marginalized is one of the great fights of our time, as you very well know. It's what lies at the core of the Me Too and Time's Up movements and so many others in recent years. But we have forgotten the immigrant story, even though their invisibility is right there staring us, literally sometimes, in the face. This man behind me is Ramiro Gomez. He was born in San Bernardino to an immigrant family. His parents worked, of course, all day So he grew up with his grandmother, who taught him how to take care of himself and how to take care of his home. He began to draw, he told me, at an early age, and eventually he managed to go to college to study design, art and design. And then 10 years ago, the big crisis struck. Ramiro could all of a sudden no longer afford his education. Ashamed, completely ashamed, and incapable of telling his grandmother he had been forced to drop out, he started living out of his car and then considered his options. He finally made a radical decision for a young man like Ramiro. He would take his grandmother's teachings, her love of cooking, of housekeeping, and become a nanny. The plan worked. Ramiro, the improbable nanny, began to work in Beverly Hills with a family in Beverly Hills. As days went by, he made friends with fellow nannies, the gardeners, the cleaning ladies, even a butler or two, Beverly Hills, Bel Air, butler. They all had a story in common. They felt invisible, they told him. And then Ramiro, one night, had an idea. He took the fancy magazines that the family discarded, the living room, the bathroom, wherever. He just grabbed them, started looking through them. He tore the ads out, the pristine hot tubs, beautiful bathrooms, the plush sofas, the bright fireplaces from Architectural Digest, Looks magazine, interior design, Vogue, what have you. And then he placed all the pages on a table in front of him and took out his brushes, took out his materials, his pencils, whatever. And then he decided he would change the narrative. What did he do? Ramiro added the invisible to the scenes where the invisible are always found in real life. They are so invisible that they should come up now. There they are. So he added the invisibles to the scenes where these people are usually found in real life. A kitchen, beautiful kitchen, completely clean, a bathroom, a garden, a bedroom, places kept clean, pretty, glorious, and frankly, working by the invisible in Los Angeles and elsewhere. He made all of them visible. You can clearly see what he did. Ramiro didn't stop there because he's an ambitious character. He began making cardboard cutouts of his friends' silhouettes, day laborers, gardeners, construction workers, nannies, and he placed them, these cutouts, along the fancy tall hedges in Bel Air, Brentwood, all over Los Angeles. He placed them on sidewalks, sitting like that, on corners, and along the median on San Vicente, where some of you might run every morning, a beautiful place. He then strategically placed some of them along the route of Barack Obama's motorcade during one of the president's visits to Los Angeles. Again, Ramiro demanded just one thing. He wanted to be an artist, of course, but these are not sophisticated images. He demanded one thing: visibility. Ramiro Gomez is now a renowned artist, and I particularly recommend you check out his Hockney interventions. I did not add them here because I want you to look for them later. It's truly a remarkable thing to do, because there too, Ramiro has made the invisible visible in those very Hockneyan images of Southern California. I absolutely recommend you check them out. Let me tell you one more American story. And I will put your knowledge to the test. I will describe a person, and I want you to tell me who I'm talking about. I am sure that it won't be too difficult. So I'll describe this person. This is a man born in the Caribbean to a mother who had left her first husband to go live with a man, another man, she had fallen in love with, a man who would eventually leave her poor and alone, hungry for knowledge. This young man, the son of this mother who had left this other man, this young man, who was called a bastard by an unfair society, educated himself, voraciously reading and studying, defying all odds, even after he had to endure his mother's premature death. Once his place of birth in the Caribbean couldn't afford him the life he had imagined, he emigrated to America, where he would become a cornerstone in the building of a nation. Frankly, an immigrant who got the job done. Who is this man? Of course, you know this man is, well, that's Lin-Manuel Miranda, but the modern Alexander Hamilton. So, my question to you is this. Would you have known it was Hamilton if I had described him to you just the way I did now? Say, 10 years ago, before the famous book even was published? Back then, 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, Hamilton was already Hamilton, after all. He was already a founding father. He was already on the $10 bill that we use every single day. Would you have known who he was by the description I just gave you? I don't think you would. Maybe some of you would, because you're very, very, very smart people, but I think the majority of you wouldn't have, especially with the description of Hamilton's youth and childhood that is basically played out in such a beautiful way in that first incredible number of the play. And this brings me to my next question. What is the true gift of Hamilton? What did Lin-Manuel Miranda, this genius, really do? Of course, the diversity of the cast is a gift. Of course, the fact that Lin-Manuel Miranda elevated urban poetry and hip-hop to the level of Shakespeare is a gift. Of course, to listen to our kids sing an entire musical soundtrack based on the most rigorous interpretation of American history with the same passion and attention they usually give to Nerf guns or Logan Paul is an absolute gift as well. But the real gift is the gift of visibility. Lin-Manuel Miranda, a child of immigrants, let's not forget that either, has granted Alexander Hamilton, the immigrant, the gift of perpetual visibility. People will forever flock to that forgotten and beautiful triangular tomb in Trinity Church in downtown New York. Hamilton will remain on the $10 bill. Alexander Hamilton will be forever visible. Susana, Christina, Jessica, and the 800,000 dreamers deserve the same fate as Hamilton. So do the millions of undocumented immigrants currently working on ending days all across America. Alexander Hamilton is an American story. We were talking about this the other day. The byline, it's not a byline, the phrase that accompanies the musical is an American musical, right? Or an American story, I think, an American musical. His hunger and courage intimately linked to his migrant identity. The immense majority of immigrants in this country today are no different. They all deserve to be seen. They should not grapple with invisibility. I have one personal story to share with you before I finish with a thought. This right here is my son, Mateo. He is 9 years old, first snow in New York just a few months ago. He is 9 years old, almost 10 years old now. He was born in Mexico and emigrated to the United States when he was about to turn 4. He spoke no English and now corrects me every day, complains about my accent, which I personally find to be very exotic and sexy, but he complains and closes his eyes every time I hesitate with a verb, although I think I still got his number when it comes to spelling, grammar. Mateo is the only foreign-born boy in his class. He proudly identifies as an immigrant, a Mexican, and an aspiring American. He loves his plural identity. He has embraced it, blooming, becoming fully visible to his peers and the rest of this, his blessed adoptive country. November 8, 2016 was a difficult day for Mateo. He was restless and anxious and didn't want to go to sleep. In the morning, when he learned Donald Trump had won, he grew quiet. After a while, he came down to the kitchen for breakfast. I asked him how he felt. I'm amazed, he told me, that so many people voted for such a bad man. He was very dramatic, and I told him, look, that's the way democracy works, and we should respect it and even cherish it. He wasn't too convinced, and then a couple of minutes passed as I saw him pace slowly around the room, around the table, thinking. I think I even saw him talking to himself a little bit. Then he came to me, looked me straight in the eye and said, well, Daddy, at least I don't look Mexican. A proud, bicultural, binational, bilingual immigrant child who had felt completely safe in his identity and his adopted country retreated into invisibility right in front of my eyes, and this is un-American. No child should feel like disappearing after an election in the United States. I will leave you with a thought. The Washington Post rightly says that democracy dies in darkness. But darkness, silence, and invisibility have proven to be fertile soil for prejudice, racism, and nativism. The most sinister side of our nature thrives in darkness. Not the American nature, our nature as human beings. If we are to truly resist the demons that we've seen lately, we have to do it through the power of storytelling, the power of voice. The lessons are there, from the horrors of the Holocaust, which we also owe in part to the tragedy of evil left unspoken for far too long, to the plight of previous generations of immigrants that flocked to the United States. Invisibility of the powerless leads to their suffering, prosecution, and sometimes outcomes far more tragic. Yesterday, in his State of the Union address, Donald Trump once again smeared the invisible with lies. And believe me, I'm a journalist. I'm really not partisan at all. This is a moral issue for me. I want to point that out. He tried to convince the country that violent gang members, 50 million people watched the State of the Union, a little bit less. He tried to convince the country that violent gang members are far more representative of the immigrant community than the millions upon millions of hardworking, humble, and grateful men and women that call this their country, their adoptive country, their home. He turned his back on low-skilled immigrants, something I found astounding, pushing for a merit system that he said would reward those, and I quote, I'm quoting, who want to work, who will contribute to our society, and who will love and respect our country. That, of course, is the very definition of every single immigrant that I have introduced here today on that screen. Why does Trump lie when it comes to this issue? Because he can lie. His story has not found a counter-story powerful enough. He's the hyper-visible, the king of the hyper-visibles, versus the invisible, and the invisible will lose. How has nativism earned such a place in American political life? Because there are social and cultural anxieties, to be sure, and some of them are, for sure, surely justified. I've seen them with my own eyes in Ohio, Pennsylvania. But mostly it's because we have allowed the invisible to retreat further into the shadows. Prejudice has thrived in darkness and in silence. Smearing the invisible and voiceless carries, nowadays, no real political cost. So it is, finally, with deep humility, but also with the knowledge I have gained after listening to the immigrant community for decades now, that I urge you to use your ingenuity, the boundless creativity that brought you here to this room in the first place, to lead the fight against invisibility. In so doing, you will be standing up not only for millions of people who aspire to belong, to be fully and gloriously visible in America, but also for the very definition of the American ideal, a country built by the powerless and the invisible. And frankly, like we saw in the video, it's also great business. So let's tell their story. Thank you very much.